Welcome to Framework. I'm John, one of the hosts of Framework. With me, as always, the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today, Al?
I am like Pierre Renard. I am comfortable and furious.
There you go. A proper way to feel in the beginning of 2025. We're here today to talk about the future and the state of movies and cinema and whether it will exist in the or die out in the course of our lives. This is something we've kind of I don't know. We've joked before about how this podcast started during the pandemic and is hopefully not going to end up just chronicling the end of movies. But it kind of comes up time to time.
Yeah.
Things are changing at a faster rate than they have. And the theatrical window is closing, and a lot of the way we consume media and the kind of media that is produced is changing dramatically as well in ways they have not.
And our old masters of the cinematic form have opinions about that.
Certainly do.
So most recently, it was Quentin Tarantino made some comments at, I think, Sundance, talking about how 2019 was the end of movies, basically. And, and that met with a lot, from what I've seen of movie people kind of sneering at what a coincidence. It's the last time he made a movie is when he marks the time of death of cinema. And basically just saying, he's turning into an old curmudgeon. He likes his movies done in this old fashioned way that he's obsessed with and just can't change with the times. And I had a completely different reaction to that. I kind of nodded along to his comments like, yeah, it's a shame, but he's right. And I contrast that with the kerfuffle around Martin Scorsese dissing superhero movies a year or two ago, where it felt like the response to that from a lot of the same circles was to agree with Scorsese and roll their eyes at Tarantino. And I did the opposite. And so I've kind of wanted to tease that out a little bit.
I don't know. I was surprised at how many people were just like, shut up, Scorsese, you're old. Why don't you appreciate Marvel movies? And that was surprising to me because I don't know. I still kind of think he's basically correct. And for God's sakes, we don't need the guy who made Raging Bull to have an opinion on Endgame. I mean, we don't. He's not going to like it. Duh. He's a 70-something-year-old man, you know? I mean, what do you expect him to say? He's not going to like, oh, finally, I get to do my Arnim Zola movie, or whatever he would do.
I don't think that it was shut up and make a Marvel movie was the response. The thing for me that tasted bad about Scorsese's comments there was that it was focused on genre, whereas Tarantino's remarks were just focused on distribution more generally. It wasn't, at least the versions of the comments I saw, which I didn't watch the whole interview.
It goes hand in hand. It really does go hand in hand, I'm afraid.
But it was easy to take Scorsese's comments as the problem is superhero movies, and because they are theme park rides, and that is not true cinema. And to me, that was dismissive of how much of cinema as a broad form has always been theme park rides, and that's been a factor
Westerns.
since Stagecoach. Yeah. And it's selling
gangster movies. Yeah. All of them.
Yeah. It's not just selling Guardians of the Galaxy short, it's selling Raiders of the Lost Ark short to say that, proper cinema is not about thrilling the audience in these base, entertaining ways. It's about wrestling with Catholic guilt.
I don't think it's that simple, though. I think the problem is not exactly superhero movies. It is the constant churn of franchise and intellectual property, and nothing ends. And it's always just, a greater increase of sequels and reboots and reboot-quels. And you can only get a green light if you're making this kind of movie, if you're, something that's based on an intellectual property. Superheroes kind of, well, I mean, they typified this, but they also really brought it to the fore. They changed cinema to the point where this is the stuff that gets released. No more comedies get made.
Well, you can get a green light, but you can't get a theatrical release, and that seems to be what Tarantino was focusing on, and that's why I guess what made his go down better for me. Because the other thing is, I think you're absolutely right about the IP and the franchising of everything, and what I objected to about Scorsese making those comments, and you can hear me rant at him more in our Killers of the Flower Moon episode at greater length about this, but I view him and his output as falling prey to a lot of those same things, even outside of the franchising, the IP markets. Like, he's repeating himself. He's using modern technology to just age launder his preferred cast, to use the same people to make the same type of movies, even as they're decades too old to be playing these parts anymore. And he's
not a Luddite. He's not, no. he's interested in the
Martin Scorsese.
He's down with like, oh, well, we're going to try experimenting. Oh, 3D's hot now because of Avatar. I'm going to make Hugo. He's going to keep doing what people like and try to push it. Well, I don't know if that's quite right. I mean, the way to win people back to the theaters was not Killers of the Flower Moon.
No. Yeah. Or Silence.
Right. He's making movies for him. But I mean, I like that he's trying to keep up with the modern trends and the modern technology and all that. He's never going to be James Cameron, but he's making the effort and doing it through his filter. You don't need me to, defend Scorsese here. I think I'm kind of maybe talking cross purposes in a way, because my hackles get up a little bit when people, it's like, shit on Scorsese at the altar of Ant-Man Quantumania. But that's not what you're doing. I understand.
Yeah, it's not to say Quantumania is great or anything. I say that about those things, my specific, and I think if you or the interviewer in that case had pushed him a little farther, and maybe the interviewer even did, and it just doesn't make the headlines, I suppose. But he would have a more nuanced view of that. But it was easy to take those comments and say, the problem is this genre of movie I don't like is the death of cinema. And furthermore, take it as the only like true movies are the type of ruminative grown-up dramas that I make. And that I do object to. I think that cinema should, and on all art forms, should be multifaceted, and there's room for different types of genres and all that. There's less and less room in the theatrical release model that we've been accustomed to for our entire lives, and Scorsese's entire life, and Tarantino's, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, this model, well, it's larger than just the theatrical model, though. It is sort of the idea of cinema as a whole. And what art films are. I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be a balance between commerce and art here. And, whether that's, you need to make the Rise of Skywalker so you can also make the Killers of the Flower Moon. I mean, obviously it's not exactly that's not exactly who made those movies, but you have to make the movies that make money. You have to make the superhero movies, or you can't make any other movies, really. That's what the business side of it runs on. Unfortunately, the limitations of this business and the people who are in charge of it, their ability to move with the tides means, I don't know. I think we're kind of going to chase the cinema out of this entirely in the near future, and that is scary to me. That it's going to be so commodified and so broken down into its component parts that make things more profitable, rather than something that people actually care about 12 months from now. And that just seems to be a trend that is rolling, and I feel like it's a snowball going down a hill. It's getting bigger and faster as it goes.
Yeah, I feel like there is a bubble aspect to that, though. There's only so much you can break things down and commodify them before people lose. Well, the gum loses its flavor entirely, and people start wanting something different.
Well, sure, but they're getting good at sort of hitting people's reptile brains with dopamine hits of content, and the exponential growth of technology has made it easier for them to do that sort of reliably than it is to, maintain an ecosystem where movies like the 70s, 70s cinema is getting made. Look at television, for example. Let's say 25 years ago.
Or, one second. It was about the 70s cinema environment. Was that a sustainable environment? I mean, how long did that last the first time around?
Yeah, 10 years, right. And then it turned into the 80s. Absolutely. But,
was it more like 7 years?
You take my point, though. We're not getting movies that would get theatrical released 10 years ago are not happening anymore and do not appear like that's going to happen. And more likely, the theaters are going to get shrunk in that way.
Yes.
So it's changing. As you say, the 70s cinema revolution was a very brief window, actually. Maybe an aberration, in fact. As we get better at making money off these things, the stuff that makes money is going to rise to the fore. I mean, this is what David Zaslav is doing to Warner Brothers, for example. The good stuff is stopping. We are going to do more Discovery Channel stuff instead. We're going to do more reality television shows. We're going to do things that are immediately short-term profitable, as most businesses are wont to do. And as a result, there's not really an investment in the future. There's not really an investment in, like movies that come out now are unlikely to be revered in the ways that movies that came out in the 80s and 90s even are now, 20, 30 years from now. They are for the moment.
I think that Tarantino would lay that because they're not getting the movies released direct to streaming are just never going to be revered the way that theatrical movies were. They don't.
Well, that's exactly the thing.
The same impact.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you agree with that on the factual basis of that.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I do too.
They're just going to get forgotten forever, and there'll be some that, do a little bit better a job of kind of lasting. I don't know. I mean, if we thought about it, we could probably come up with what are the biggest 5 streaming movies of the last 10 years? And we could come up with a list, but
I was just trying to think that what is the most memorable or the biggest cultural impact of a direct to streaming movie? And I don't know.
Glass Onion, I guess. I
guess that, yeah.
I'm
sure that if we actually looked it up somehow on IMDb or whatever, to find what the highest rating was, or Rotten Tomatoes or whatever metric you'd use, when we looked up the most successful direct streaming movies, we'd probably be like, oh yeah, I guess that was direct to streaming. I just kind of presumed it was theatrical. Is probably what would happen there. But okay, so we're on the same page, you and I and Tarantino. I think that streaming is inherently lesser in terms of cultural impact. That's kind of a proven fact now. We don't need to debate.
I mean, it's as simple as the difference between dumping all your episodes at one moment or playing them out over 12 weeks. It's you're going to get people talking about them for a week, or you're going to have a much longer cultural tale, and that's how you kind of build an audience. Is people keep talking about Game of Thrones. They don't keep talking about the thing that just lands and then it's gone. These are so fleeting that I can't even tell you. What was that Jeff Goldblum Chaos show? You remember that one? That one came out in the fall. He played Zeus. It was about modern day Greek gods. It was a whole series. It was supposed to be a whole like a long running show, and it didn't have much cultural impact. No one really watched it. And then it was replaced by another thing in 2 weeks, and they quietly announced it was canceled like a month later. And there's probably one of those every week or two. Between all the streaming networks. I don't know how many shows there are right now about spy procedurals. I can't tell the difference between the recruit, the agent, whatever they all are. I couldn't tell you what the difference is. I'm sure somebody could, but those shows aren't going to be remembered in the way, I don't know, even something as sort of niche as The Americans is probably, just going to have more of a cultural impact and a legacy.
All right. I think there's a couple things to unpack here. One is we should probably acknowledge up front that this is all coinciding with us getting old and crustier.
It won't be like how it used to be.
Yeah. And so that's part of the argument that I've seen. Again, people, the Letterboxd crowd seems a lot more ready to fire off at Tarantino than they were Scorsese about this is, you're just bitching about the format that you're accustomed to changing because you're becoming an old man, and things will still get made and people will watch them, and it'll look a little different than what you prefer, but it's not fundamentally different. And that is, that is a sort of stance that I kind of held to with most things for a long time. We talked about in our No Country for Old Men episodes. That's sort of the best expression of that mindset, and that was very influential on me for a long time. I'm starting to feel differently that age, and I don't know how much of that is just like entering my 40s and how much is the technological age that we're in is fundamentally shifting things. Because like you said earlier, with the Zaslav stuff at Warner Brothers, I mean, that is to me, that is less about, there's a shift in movie making philosophy so much as it's the movie industry being subsumed by the tech industry. And this is what I see. And we're going to get into how, as we talk about, what does the future of movies look like? I don't think we can talk about that without talking about AI in some form. But the way that I have seen, I've gone on a journey over the last couple of years with AI stuff, from being worried, however briefly and vaguely, that we were about to like hit the singularity and the whole world would be turned upside down, to now. I mean, my whole thing there is that it's an anti-singularity. Is that it turns out once you put the machine in charge of educating itself, it doesn't become smarter at an exponential rate. It just becomes steadily dumber. And so the impact I've seen of AI integration in all fields, right, so far has been like, it hasn't made anything that much better. It's been a very effective way to for businesses to cut costs by 50% by making things only 20% worse. And that seems to be the Zaslav approach to content as well. We can do things a lot more cheaply by making them all a little worse. And that will work for a quarter or two, I think. But as you said, over time, not sustainable is.
Well, I mean, look at Disney, for example. The live action remakes of their cartoon properties, that is short-sighted, in so many obvious ways. And they're already kind of climbing to the end of that. They're hitting the end of things that people want to see remade. And so you're gonna, they're gonna end up remaking, I don't know, the Great Mouse Detective and the Rescuers at some point, and you're gonna see diminishing returns setting in as these movies that they've burned through all their catalog that people do have the nostalgic connection to. And in the meantime, they're not creating new things for people to have nostalgic connections to. They're sort of enhancing the brand of these, in some cases, 80-year-old films. So they can keep selling the same things over and over in diluted alt versions. And that's zero sum, like at the end, it's good for the short term, for the board of directors makes money off of that, but it does not move culture forward, certainly. And it does not build a bedrock to continue on,
But I'm not even here to talk about how Disney has a duty to move culture forward. That is what they should truly be focused on. I just mean that what you're talking about there, I think, is true, but it also is it ties me back to my points about Scorsese and how I don't think that he is blameless in this type of thing, because what's tied into that too, that sort of constant, strip mining and then regurgitation of old IP to, draw a few more drops of blood out of the stone. That is a problem of technology and sort of, culture stagnating, but that's also a gerontocracy issue, which America, in my view, and by extension Hollywood, is very focused on sort of our glory days of the past and unwilling to really embrace what it would mean to make the future better. So instead, we're just settling for we're gonna give people the same stuff as before. And there's a whole generation around our generation, Generation X, that sort of, I mean, to get political on it, denied political power for their entire adulthoods, and even down to things of being able to afford a home at a reasonable age, but to build a family at a younger age and all that stuff. And what, in the exchange of letting all the older and older people hold the reins of power, the baby boomers control everything for our entire lives, is, well, but we got a lot better at giving you like the cartoon shows of your youth updated for your adulthood. And that's
Right.
that's a problem for all of society, and it's a problem for Hollywood because it's unsustainable. And now there's generations coming up below that I mean, they have their own stuff, but a lot of their stuff is regurgitated from the old stuff too, even more directly than in past generations. And they're not going to have the same level of connection to it, I don't think.
I have a friend who's a school teacher. He's guest on the show once, actually. And he's told me that it's really odd because a lot of the formative fairy tale for a lot of kids now is Shrek, which is the deconstructive satirical take of the fairy tale. So it's the alt version is the thing they're introduced to. Sort of.
Yeah. Alex, that was on our Superman episode. I remember that stuck with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The copy of the copy is now the thing. And I mean, that's got to be true for whatever the multiple versions of these things. And we used to have this figured out, like when Spielberg made Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is like, it's a throwback to the 1930s. It's the kind of thing they used to made back then, but we're going to do it updated. We're going to create our own thing. We're going to, do the stuff, take the stuff we like, mix it up, create a new original piece. And now the version of that is like, well, we're just going to do another Indiana Jones. Who do we get to play the new Indiana Jones? And it's that
and
on and on.
The answer to that is we get Harrison Ford to still do it when he's 80. And that's what I don't think Scorsese can wash his hands of entirely.
You just hate the Irishman.
I hate a bit. But I also hate the existence of Indiana Jones and what was the last one even called?
The Dial of Destiny.
Dial of Destiny. But that's the thing is we're, instead of getting an Indiana Jones for a new generation, the new generation just gets the same old Indiana Jones, and that is again,
or Ghostbusters,
not totally
or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any of them, Star Wars, all of it. We're not doing the new things anymore, and and this is actually just a symptom of the larger thing, I think, which is the content mill becoming so efficient and profitable that becomes the thing, more than anything else, more than and obviously studios were never about art, really. Even in the in the halcyon days of the 1970s, they were just trying to make money. That was the most expedient way to make money at the time. I mean, I think the logic might have been a little bit more like, well, if we make good movies, people will come to the good movies, than it is now, which is, if we make familiar things, people will come to the familiar things. So that is a significant negative change, though.
Yes, there's more analytics involved. They're able to break it down more. But I still think that, and this is where you can call me naive if you want. I think that there's a limit to that. I mean, and they are, I keep saying strip mining. I'm trying to think, what's the term for like logging an entire region?
Deforestation.
Yes, there's a deforestation of this IP. They're clear cutting. That's what I was groping for. I think that is a really effective marketing plan for a while to make those live action remakes. But eventually you have to start making new cartoons to enable to have things to keep remaking in live action. And
but that's the next board of directors problem.
Right, exactly.
Then they got to reinvent.
That bill comes due eventually. And I think they're clear cutting the nostalgia bait. Where, it turns out you can't necessarily make Willow streaming series indefinitely. They're just that forest never grew to its full height, and you can't maintain that forever. Disney, I say I'll give them a tad of credit where it's due. I suppose they seem to have realized about the diminishing return setting in for Star Wars and Marvel, and slowed down that pipeline a little bit and are trying to figure out something a little more sustainable going forward. Sustainable makes it sound more responsible and less just greedy, but that's a strange thing, though. Actually, if you are greedy and you have bigger ambitions, then sustainability is important to your greed. If you want to do
not in the
more
short
than one
term.
quarter worth of profits,
not in the short term. That's how you get Endgame and Rise of Skywalker coming out in the same calendar year. The year cinema ended, 2019. In fact,
that's right.
So they're kind of pushing for the quickest possible profit. I mean, clearly, blatantly, provably. And I don't see any evidence they've changed that. Then they moved everything to Disney Plus. They thought that's where it all was. Turns out it's not. But
I mean, I think the evidence is that Marvel and Star Wars stuff started coming out half as often or way less than that for Star Wars stuff after a while.
At first. Not at first. They just burnt through it so fast, and everyone got sick of it. And
that's my point. People got sick of it. Like they did. The forest was eventually all cut down, and they're struggling to figure out what to do next with that. They want to keep deforesting, but you have to make some new forest in order to cut down the trees at some point. Is I think the inevitable thing here, and I think that to whatever degree they have that all mapped out and make it just a content mill, it creates an opening for people to be even. I'm trying to put this in the least lofty terms possible, but for audiences to be even more blown away by a just modicum of creativity and originality in some new movie form.
You look at kind of the surprise horror hits of the year, and The Substance and Nosferatu. Those are movies I wouldn't thought would be profitable. They were huge. So there's a small audience for it, at least.
Nosferatu, maybe not the best example of a non-IP original story breaking through, but The Substance, sure.
No one thought Nosferatu was going to make money like it did, though. You're right, though. A24 horror movies is kind of its own thing at this point as well. It's the elevated horror that we talked about. That is a brand in a way.
Well, I guess there's something too about like how quickly, say, you go back 10 years and then 20 years, something like Harry Potter or Avatar, how quickly those were sort of, assimilated to become brands for this type of IP, expansion and stripping. But those were original concepts and they made all the money in the world. They're highly derivative concepts, but they were original IPs. That you would think that there would be more enthusiasm for finding another Avatar, I guess, even as much as I don't like those movies. From
Harry
a boardroom
Potter
perspective.
Harry Potter should be a replicatable kind of thing, like it's like you said, it's nothing. It's a bit derivative in a lot of its respects, but it's kind of like, and it's hard to talk about this franchise now. It's sort of a minefield, but like, it's sort of undeniable that the original run of Harry Potter books and by extension the films was very creative, created characters that people liked and caught the zeitgeist, by doing familiar things. And, there's a generation of kids who, know their Hogwarts house, and it's a sort of cornerstone of their young personalities is making these realizations about themselves. That's and it's kind of just using like it's using regular ingredients, flour and eggs. Right. You can do it.
Yeah, and from a boardroom perspective, it should be really attractive to try and do that again. And I mean, people tried. Obviously, there was Percy Jacksons and so forth. But
you're right. Yeah, I mean, there was an X factor that is hard to replicate.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be magical children. As the
it
thing.
Shouldn't be, actually, if you're trying to do the original thing.
I think if I'm in that boardroom, I say, no, we need it. Find an author that has an in with kids and created a world that we can expand outward on. Rather than it's all just very inward and backward looking is I think what we're mainly grousing about with the IP stuff. It's look, there's plenty of stones out there. Like it's like that's what. But I think this is what the infestation of the tech industry taking over everything. It's all about we can make it more efficient to squeeze blood out of these stones, and not just like, but actually there are plenty of stones lying around. Like finding stones shouldn't be the hard part.
No, it shouldn't. I mean, is it possible this stuff all exists out there? You know, that there are these good to great kind of ideas and stories and things that just no one wants to take a chance on because they're not proven. It's not just not how the industry works. I feel like that is the case, right? I feel like the next Harry Potter exists in some form right now. It just hasn't been discovered and utilized in the way that Harry Potter was.
Well, I think there are two ways of looking at that. I mean, of reading that question. Do you mean that these things exist somewhere buried in the libraries of the streaming services and just aren't making it through to audiences, even though they're being produced? Or you just mean the source material is out there in terms of it?
Well, I meant the source material, but
yeah,
you know, yeah, I guess it's possible that you know that there is the next thing that has been created and just they didn't know how to market it and use it. I mean, we've certainly seen that happen. Yeah,
I want to dial in on because I think this is what Tarantino was this comment seemed more focused on to me, is the idea that maybe there is another Harry Potter that's actually already been made and released, and yet it's more of a marketing issue because it just gets dropped into the ocean of content and there's no time for fanfare or the pageantry of the theatrical distribution and all that. It doesn't have a chance to penetrate. And if that's almost a scarier, harder to fix problem for the industry, I would say, if that is the issue.
Well, I mean, I guess the obvious question then is, well, is Stranger Things not that, maybe? Or did Stranger Things just happen to hit at the exact right early moment in streaming where it could become that thing? And if Stranger Things season 1 was dropped right now, it would just fade into obscurity like so many of these others do, because the market has been thoroughly saturated at this point, and no one knows what Stranger Things is.
Yeah, Stranger Things also came out before 2019, so even if that wouldn't function as an effective rebuttal to Tarantino's point anyway, I don't think.
Is it that binary though? Did we just flip the switch with the pandemic, and then everything's busted now as a result of that? I mean, if that's the case, we might just work our way out of it. Or we could have been set off on a really bad path that is unable to be fixed, which, you know, other world events might suggest that's the case.
Yeah. Well, I do tend to think that all problems can be fixed, and most of them will eventually. I don't know that they will be fixed on a timeline that is useful to us. Personally, that's where my fears revolve around.
That's optimistic for me, though, honestly.
I mean, there is versions of it where things never are, where life does not find a way. That is not always the case.
Well, I mean, you know, broad picture, yeah, that's true for a lot of stuff. In the world of like just cinema as an art form, you know, I feel a little more comfortable talking about that simply because it is theoretically lower stakes. It's still part of the cultural thing, but
it's a little more graspable for people like us.
Yeah. My fear is that we kind of, because it's been our lives, you know, so completely dominant in our lives, it's easy to forget how new cinema is. How it's been around like maybe 150 years in its most nascent form, you know, something like that. Late 1800s is when you start to, you know, put pictures together at a fast clip and you know, get the illusion of movement.
Yeah,
that's new.
When we're talking about cinema, we're talking you and I. And
I'm being generous here. I'm being generous with 150 years. You know,
it's about 100 because we're talking about scripted fictional mass entertainments.
Or I'm talking about the art form. I'm talking about it as, you know, like auteurs, creating, you know, sort of indelible, memorable kind of experiences with this medium of film. You know, film is going away. First off, the literal film is going away.
Yes.
I worry that as the old masters die out, you know, as the guys from the 70s, you know, the guys carrying the torch, your Scorsese's, for example, you know, Coppola's, you know, the guys who kind of defined what cinema is to Gen X, you know, and beyond, as they go, and we are kind of in the arms and the grip of this streaming empire. As movie theaters are closing, cinema itself kind of stops being a thing, and we kind of just it gets reduced to content. It gets reduced to reality television and short, viewable things, and the most recent episode of the superhero of your choice, and AI movies designed specifically for you to be forgotten as soon as you're done with them. That's the scary thing to me, is that it all just goes away in the way like daguerreotype photographs did. Like it's just it was a passing fad in the scheme of things of human development. And that never seemed possible to me until recently.
But daguerreotypes went away, but photography stayed around.
In a form, it's changed dramatically. I don't know. I don't have an immediate go-to medium that didn't survive. Exactly.
This is my point. That's I don't.
But was there anything beside books for like several thousand years?
I mean, there was
theater. There was theater.
Theater. And theater. Yeah, you could argue theater has not survived.
Yeah,
but stubbornly, it will not go away entirely.
Well, and I agree. I don't think movies will go away entirely, but I do think movie theaters are going to become boutique operations that are going to be like half repertory, of the movies we watched when we were kids, maybe, and the other half will be, or maybe 3/4 will be the latest superhero or what have you slop, and nothing gets released except the big tentpoles, and you get I don't know, 2 of those a month, and they are indistinguishable, and you can probably watch them day and date if you spend $50 at home.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you said that like it was the end of the world, and I just don't.
Well, it's the end of cinema. It's the end of the movie theater. I don't know.
Cinema means something different to me.
Yeah, do we? I don't think we have a new crop of Spielbergs popping up. I don't think they exist. I don't know.
No. I mean, how many Spielbergs have there been?
Yeah, really fair, but
I mean, I don't think people are going to stop making art. Is my thing, and yes, but people have been complaining about this since Spielberg came around, since Jaws.
Right? He was the end of art.
He was the end of art himself at one point. Now he's the standard bearer for it, and I think maybe this is just generational change, and this is the No Country stuff.
It's like how The Simpsons was subversive when it came out.
Yeah, exactly. Because I look at this, okay, and I'm again, trying to frame this through through cynical eyes as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But take for example, the one thing that you mentioned there is AI movies that are people. This was a sort of threatened promise of AI probably a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Was we're getting close to the point where people can just type in a prompt to Chat GPT or whatever, the movie GPT, and it will just produce a movie for that person that no one else has ever seen and put it directly into their eyeballs. And it's this totally bespoke thing. And that's what movie making will be. Nobody will be out there humans will not actually be out there acting and recording themselves acting and producing for the masses. Yeah. And one, again, I think that overestimated the arc of the improvement of AI technology. I mean,
2 years is no amount of time for that to happen. We're talking like 20 years.
Yeah, well, 2 years ago, people were saying we're 6 months away from this, and
they were wrong.
Now,
but
yes, I don't think we're closer than we were in 2022.
Have you seen it? Some of that's pretty impressive stuff, man. Be like, I want to see, Chris Farley as the Joker, and I want him to be, running down through a crowded mall, and you can see that, and it'll look real, and you'll be like, well, that looks real,
Yes, looks real is not the only hurdle to get over. Is my point. That is the thing. Yes, it will improve over time.
One
I think it plateaued. Yes, no, it's huge.
Yeah.
I think the progress on that has plateaued somewhat, but that is where it will continue. Where it seems to have really stalled out for me is on the writing end of things. Is you can get and it's part of it. I guess there is a craft to it of if you give things the AIs just the right prompts, you can produce something that is very recognizably the thing you asked for. And
I think even that gets streamlined, though. Even that gets easier to do. Even that, like that's just going to get exponential rate of growth on this tech, man. I think that
I think it's a rate of decay as well, though.
We'll see. Well, yes. I mean, that is the point. We're not worried that this is going to come up with masterpieces.
Right. I think that was kind of the worry a couple years ago.
I mean, maybe that will happen too. Is a possibility, but I mean, I think the alternative might be worse, which is that it will take over and it will be everywhere, but it won't be good. It'll be sloppy. It'll be a mess. And
but then somebody doesn't have to be a Spielberg to suddenly blow everybody's minds. That a Martin Campbell could show up, release what would have been a 3-star movie in the 90s, and people who have had nothing but derivative AI slop plugged directly into their brains for 10 years will be just blown away by its creativity and originality and
that's not good.
I think it'll survive.
That's not good at all. That sucks. I mean,
I think that it means the AI doesn't run the entire world. Again, I'm putting this all in the most cynical way possible, because the idea here, again, I don't think that the personalized AI movies, even if they
a short-term boon for the porn industry, though, I imagine.
It could completely take over the porn industry. Yeah. Yes, that is an important caveat, I suppose. It will, but it will end the porn industry to a degree.
Oh yeah,
but it will not. True. I don't think that'll happen for the Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood might be screwed because just their stranglehold on film production is such that is fading, and we'll start seeing more movies produced elsewhere in the world.
Yeah,
but using Hollywood as shorthand for just a film industry that makes scripted movies. I think that the more AI slop there is out there, the better even the less amazing original works start to look. And I also think that this is again part of like the film industry becoming subsumed by the tech industry. If the idea of movies is becoming in a dystopian way, if Hulu and Disney are not worried about progressing culture, but movies are just grist for the social media mill. Mm-hmm. It's just a way to get people to tweet about things and engage in things and put more things, more of themselves online for more data to be scraped. Well, personalized, bespoke AI movies do not serve that function. Nobody's going to have a conversation with me on X or Meta or any of these dystopian platforms about a movie that I saw that nobody else saw.
Fair enough. But if you're engaged with, something that the same company owns, if you're still engaging with the online thing and you are giving your, some part of yourself in your prompts, if this movie is devised for you, it's because they know you. It's because they know what you buy. They know what you're interested in, what you look up online. Then, they're getting you anyway there. They're still getting you from a different direction. You don't need to be commenting.
Oh, well, I think they might. Well, I mean, maybe if we all just become brains and vats that are
sometimes
just
I think
as useful.
Our best possible future is the one from WALL-E. Like if we get there, we might consider ourselves lucky, where we're just sort of sentient blobs with constant entertainment feeds in front of our face, getting fed and floating around, purposeless. That's like, at least you're alive.
But we're several steps from there.
That won't be our life.
This is the sort of, if you and I are coming up with our dystopian fiction here for what future movies is, how about this as a pitch?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what? Okay, well, maybe I should frame this to you a different way. An aspect of technology that interests me is the way that sometimes there are these leap forwards in what technology is capable of, and that seem like they're going to revolutionize everything. And then people just kind of reject them in favor of something more more basic and simple and analog. And for example, we are middle-aged white guys. So we both probably read Infinite Jest at some point in our 20s, right?
I gave it a shot. Well.
The only thing of that 1,200 page tome that made an impression on me that sticks with me to this day really is that's a sort of dystopian near future where the video phone technology. Again, this is written in 1990 or something. So video phones was futuristic technology as opposed to something that we just have in our phones and don't use that much right now. But one of the things that David Foster Wallace predicted really, I thought astutely, was the idea that, video phones would become really commonplace and everybody would have them, but nobody would like them and nobody would actually use them. And the industry that sprung up around video phones was actually where everybody made their money was elaborate, really lifelike Mission Impossible masks of your own face, so that you didn't have to put on makeup to do a video call or fix yourself up, because people didn't really want that to be seen every time they were on the phone. And I look at that you know what turned out to be a much bigger revolution in communications than video phones? Texting. Yeah, that's what we want to use. It's even lower maintenance. It puts less of ourselves out there, and all that. So I think that. So okay, my dystopian vision for you, for our movie that I guess we're now making about the future of the movie industry is they come out with this photo perfect, instantly made AI movies for everybody, and everybody gets really excited about that for a month or so. And then gets really bored with it because they can watch the movie, but they don't have anybody to talk to about it. And the next Spielbergs become not filmmakers necessarily, but just influencers. It's people who, the new creative outlet is just people who know how to use the AI prompts to prompt the AI to make a mass market, appealable story. And the next Spielberg is just somebody who has a lot of followers that will follow the AI prompts that new Spielberg has given them to watch the same movie so that they can talk about it again.
I mean, that's that's kind of what I'm scared of. Yeah, that's absolutely.
Is that just a new art form though? Or
I guess it is. But it is sort of inherently one that I don't know. When it's democratized to that level, I mean, first off, I mean, if it's that simple, if it's truly that easy, I mean, even if we're talking you worked a month on this prompt, even then, that, doesn't hold a candle to producing a film.
But is the amount of sweat that goes into it what matters, or is the output?
Well, the other part of that is the output is entirely going to be based on pre-existing material. So the language won't change. It'll be, it'll still look like Jaws. It's not innovating in that way, unless it gets really smart, I guess. But that's the sort of smart we're skeptical of.
I'm saying that in this version, my vision of it, it's still a human that brings the smarts to it. A human has to figure out a way to finesse the thing and to introduce the innovation into it using these things, these tools. Which in a way,
it's still based on existing material, though. All AI slop comes from is stuff that has already been created by other artists. That's what it's basing all of its stuff on. The shot composition comes from something that has already been shot. The design is a amalgam of it's in the style of this guy, or this color palette comes from this guy, and it has this many points because it is that esteemed culturally. So. You can make something that's make it look like Van Gogh painted it, and it will, but it can't just be a Van Gogh on its own. And so that is stagnating culturally.
Yeah. If you've established that, I think.
Okay.
And I guess, but this is
that will be cool for a few months, though, when we're all playing around with it, no doubt. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that ultimately, yes, my contention was that there is this sort of wall in the AI development that it's never. It might be able to do. It could kind of imitate Wes Anderson. Okay, I don't think it's never going to be able to pull off David Lynch, and even the Wes Anderson stuff. I don't think really captures.
No,
I mean it's not
the aesthetic.
You're not going to fool anybody into thinking that this is one of the real ones. if you put it next to Darjeeling Limited. But yeah, and I think there are just walls that it struggles with, and one of them, especially again on the creative side, the writing side, especially AI seem very incapable of doing humor.
Yeah,
which is really it's become a remarkable contrast for all of like the MCU used to be the standard bearer for this homogenization and assembly line product that's soulless and all that. Since the AI stuff, like the large language models have come out, now it stands out really well as really distinctive of, yeah, but those movies have jokes. And that is their whole identity is built around jokes. And that's what some people, it shits some people about them. But that's also what AI cannot reproduce for shit.
that's true. I mean, we do a sort of a middling job of producing it with people too at this point,
But now we're just being curmudgeons about it.
Yeah, sure. It's a true bummer. I don't know. I mean, I guess you can still see very funny comedy on television. It still exists there. From series to sketches, there's good comedy getting produced still.
It's still fairly cheap to produce comedy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's true. And that, again, I do think that I view it as a silver lining that at best, at most, this stuff can just lower people's standards so that they can be more easily wowed by bespoke comedy or whatever, human stuff. And I think that's just always going to be a chink in the armor of the robots as far as
let's hope.
Holding our attention permanently.
I mean, don't forget, we are all getting dumber.
That is a problem.
And what we're talking about right now would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. These AI generated films, I would not have guessed this would be in the cards.
No, but a lot of the same topics we're discussing were things that people were bitching and doom saying about in the 70s when Star Wars and Jaws came out.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
It was what I was talking about. If we end up in a world where what it means to be a filmmaker is now just somebody who knows the proper way to speak to a large language model to spit out a movie that other people will like. I mean, is that not just kind of fulfilling the promise of like the indie film revolution entirely? That the idea that we're going to democratize film production so you don't have to just do it in the studio system and people can make Clerks with their buddies and with no overhead.
I don't know that Scorsese would approve, but I mean, you don't think something just tangible and real is lost there? I mean, I guess obviously it is. It's a new art form. It's different. And yeah, we're old, and so we don't get it. Well, I mean, fair enough, I guess, but I don't have to like it. I don't have to like it.
How new of an art? Yes, that's the one issue we keep running into. We don't have to like it, but how new of an art form is it? I think it's ultimately because this I guess gets back to talking about what does it mean? What does cinema as a term mean? Because to me, I always viewed it as just sort of an offshoot, a branch of literature, which is to say storytelling, fiction, and that has gone through different media. Like the mediums, that there were books and there was theater, and maybe opera had a bigger day at one point than it is having now. But putting those images onto screens, that was a logical next step, and I think it's a very valid art form. I don't know that we're going to stop watching screen images tell us stories.
Certainly not. But yeah,
whether it's in a theatrical setting or at home.
It's just most of the aspects of cinema will probably fall by the wayside, like cameras. There'll be less and less need. We probably won't have. We may not have actors in these movies eventually.
That's another thing. I mean, and this is what I think Scorsese is not blameless again. If we end up in a position where we are we're getting new movies ostensibly because people are feeding AI prompts, but we're not getting any new actors because they're just recycling the images of Clark Gable and Bruce Willis and endlessly. That Scorsese doesn't get to wash his hands of that.
Well, no, he's he's giving the new technology a full articulation. He's giving it a shot, seeing what it's capable of. In the case of The Irishman, it turned out to be a bit of a problem, maybe. The worst part about that movie, actually, right? It's the the de-aging.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's so hard to figure out what the other bad things would be because it's in your face constantly. But regardless, I'm not here to just to bash The Irishman. And there's one other thing you mentioned that I wanted to touch on, though, is that movies becoming more repertory. Like that's another part of this. I do think, that in the dystopian future, there'll be less movie theaters around. I do think movie theaters will survive in some form, but maybe the shift in the evolution is that they're no longer the default setting for initial releases.
Yeah.
That's something that Tarantino is very into, and we are by generational extension.
Yes.
But is it a disaster for culture, or is it terrible for the industry if the new normal becomes movies, even big would-be blockbuster movies, are released to streaming immediately, and the ones that make it into theaters are the ones that theaters are now more like they're just showing whatever the top 10 on Netflix is that week. And it's sort of like it is now, where that's a couple of new movies that have kind of caught on, and then randomly, Con Air will have a resurgence and be on the Netflix top 10 with Aaron Brockovich suddenly shows up there, and nobody's quite sure why, but it just caught on the way that memes do, I guess. And so those things can be put back into theaters for people that are excited about that week and are interested enough to go to a theater.
I mean,
is that the end of the world?
Well, it's less than what we have. I live in New York City. It's there's always repertory screenings. That you can always go see an old movie, and it's constantly rotating. You wait long enough, you'll get a chance to watch anything, basically. So for me, that would be less. That would be less. I can't go see.
In what way is it less? We still have access to every movie ever made in our homes in this version, as we do now.
I'm a huge fan of the movie theater experience. I try to go once a week. I don't really hit that, but that's my goal. I would like to go to the movies a lot more than I do, especially as it is a vanishing industry. I feel like, I want to see mediocre films in theaters. It's the best chance that movie's going to have. If I get and go see some shitty horror film, I'm probably going to enjoy it a lot more in a movie theater than I will at home. I'm on the wavelength. I'm locked in. I'm not looking at my phone. I'm having a communal experience. It's a big dark room with a huge screen, and that is a loss for me if those go away, especially for new movies. And I like going to a repertory screening. I love it, but it's the best chance a movie has to work, I think.
Oh, for sure. I guess my optimistic view is either you and I are more Tarantino, like mutant outliers, than we want to admit, and most people just don't care about that whatsoever. In which case, maybe it's not that big of a loss to people who aren't us, or we are more typical, and maybe we're a little more aware of this aspect of ourselves and our desires around this than the median moviegoer, but the hunger for the communal experience will not go away, even as the technology for making the experience less and less communal gets better. That people will still want that, because that's why I think that reason why I don't think those individualized movies will catch on is people want the communal experience, even if it's not about sitting next to somebody in the theater. They do want to share the movie with somebody. That's why they live on.
Oh yeah,
catch on is it gives us a framework for discussing, culture with people who are different than us. Is we can all we have very different frames of references, but we can all kind of know what it means if someone's a Han Solo.
Yeah, there's something. I mean, you remember during the pandemic, how much you missed it, or I sometimes I'll watch audience reaction videos on YouTube just to kind of get the thrill of a vicarious audience enjoying a film. You watch a Jackass movie in a crowded movie theater or at home, and the difference is night and day. There's something really to be said about having these things with other people. That's why I'm so sad comedies aren't released theatrically anymore. Like
Yeah.
that used to be the best thing to do. Go see a funny movie in the movie theater. Everyone laughs at it. That God, you would have a good time. It's just not the same at home. Never can be even with the first viewing. It's just you lose an ineffable thing, and I guess it's lost. Honestly, I think it really is on the way out. I don't know if I'd put like a timeline on this, but I think within our lifetimes, this state of being with movie theaters is going to happen.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're going to die out entirely, because I do think that there is an element of this where as much as these things are seem like they're dying out, it creates an environment for younger generations to discover them for themselves. And
I hope so, man.
Like it will become a TikTok trend at some point. Be like, you know what's amazing? Watching a comedy in a movie theater full of people, and it'll be frustrating for us that a younger generation will think that they invented that themselves. But it will come around, because that's for as much as
how brick and mortar shops are all the brick and mortar shops are going away, man. It's all going away, and maybe movie theaters are no different than a Barnes and Noble. It's
I think they're more like concert venues.
Yeah, I get that. I don't know. It's still a commodity being sold.
None of us.
Maybe more experiential for us than the general public, as you say, though. Maybe it truly is just we are receiving content at this movie theater in the form of a new Avengers film.
Yes, and in the form that we are comfortable with and enjoy. But I don't know. For as much as I guess that some of my optimism here, we're calling it optimism, is that for like all these forces that we're complaining about, they're market driven, and it's
right.
The studios seem to be really fucking things up on the supply side, but I don't think it fundamentally changes the demand. Social media might have to some degree, but I think the demand is going to be fairly stubborn. And again, whether it's audiences or studios will rediscover some of these things that we think might be gone for good. And I think they will survive in some form.
Well, they're not going to make a Lion King live action sequel if the first one didn't make $1.5 billion, though. What we demand may not be what's good for us.
That's been true for all of human history.
Okay. You're right.
I feel like we're only going to see high art in the 1930s.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But things were a little clumsier back then. The analytics were not there to really, and so there was. Yeah, I guess
what we need is a franchise of Oz movies. Yes.
Yeah. Things were sloppier back then, so there was more room for interesting, I guess, accidents to occur, and maybe that's what we're in danger of losing. But I don't know. Like, I don't think we can really mechanize all the accidents out of the human experience. And
fair point.
So the more we do, the more those accidents will stand out and impact people. And
well, there'll always be unimaginable X factors. There are always going to be things that we can't predict that really change everything, like texting. There'll be things that change the world that we haven't thought of yet. And that a genius will one day think of and become a billionaire. And and
the world it's not the huge technical, because it's like the texting or Twitter, like Twitter being the social media company that conquered the world.
Mm-hmm.
But when you looked at it, they didn't make a technological breakthrough. They said, we're going to give you less to work with. And that was what broke through us people somehow. So I don't know. That's why I said technology even is not a straight line, I guess, was the point that I was trying to get to there somehow.
Well, I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that my predictions are shoot from the hip, not really cognizant of everything, all the market details in play. I hope that my take on this is short-sighted. That'd be great. I think, and it's not unlikely either, is the nice thing. I'm probably missing quite a few important things. But
we're both wrong about almost everything we've said today. I just hope we hope that you're wrong about the more pessimistic ones. But we'll find out, I guess.
I mean, so that's it. I mean, for now, this is sort of an ongoing conversation we're having with this program, I would say, as things develop. I'm interested to follow it as a trend for sure. hopefully there'll be some new exciting thing that changes the trajectory dramatically, and we can see where we're headed then.
But first, we're going to go back to talking about Coen Brothers movies from 15 years ago and video games from 10 and 15 years ago, and doing our own part to contribute to the nostalgia cycle of decay.
Why can't we build our audience, Hal? Thank you for listening.